Welcome to Break the Needle. I'm your host, Adam Zivo, and I'm here to tackle Canada's problems with drugs, addiction, and crime. Today, we'll be chatting with Amy Hamm, a Vancouver based political commentator who previously worked as a nurse in Vancouver's infamously drug infested downtown east side. While Amy is best known for her criticism of pediatric gender care, she is also a staunch opponent of radical harm reductionism. Her opposition to the movement is informed by the dismal conditions and practices she observed on the street, which left a lasting impression on her. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Amy, can you give us an overview of your work as a nurse? How did you end up doing frontline work with Vancouver's most vulnerable communities?
I had been a nurse for several years before I started working down there. Before I went into nursing, I had actually been a volunteer for many years with the Elizabeth Fry Society in the downtown east side at Vancouver's downtown community court. So I had already sort of worked with a similar population, although in the justice system rather than in the healthcare system. It was just an area that I was interested in. And I also sort of felt that as a resident of Vancouver, knowing how horrific the conditions were down there and the way that people were living, it sort of felt like a responsibility to actually try to help these people who just had such a wildly different quality of life and standard of living than most Canadians have.
And what were the conditions that you observed on the ground? And be as specific as possible. Help us imagine it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to understate how absolutely horrific things are down there. And I don't think unless you go in and see the conditions inside of the SROs. So SRO stands for single resident occupancy, and that's the so-called sort of social housing where most of the addicts in the downtown east side are living. And so these are small rooms in what used there a lot of them are very old hotel buildings. They have shared bathrooms, and the conditions in these buildings are just absolutely deplorable. A lot of these buildings should be condemned, and the city, I think, knows this, and they're not condemned because it would result in hundreds more people or thousands more people immediately being homeless. But, we're talking about buildings that are infested with cockroaches, with rats, with mice, with mold. There's water damage. Things are just falling apart. There are buildings where rooms, entire floors are barricaded off because they're in such poor condition. There are people inside who are hoarding. Women are being prostituted inside of these buildings. You see drug dealers coming in and out. People are cooking their drugs in the hallways. There's violence. It's constantly just noisy. There's no possible way for someone to live a normal, healthy, or sober life inside of these places. And I think a lot of what the public sees is the chaos out on the streets. And it's actually even worse when you get inside these buildings. And I knew people that preferred sleeping on the street rather than sleeping inside of the SROs, and that's just how absolutely horrific they are.
And just in 30 or 40 seconds, what are some of the main misconceptions that Canadians have about the realities of Vancouver's downtown east side?
I think the largest thing is that people look at it and they say, "Oh, if they had more of this or more of that," they see poverty, they see maybe a lack of funding or a lack of services. That is absolutely not the problem. There's so much money down there. The Vancouver Police Department a few years ago commissioned this report to try to look at how much money is being spent. It's more than $1 million a day just in the downtown east side. There aren't that many people living like this. We're spending massive amounts of money, and the problem is what we're doing with the money. It's the problem is not poverty, the problem is what we're doing with the money down there.
Okay, so we're throwing in $1 million a day into this neighborhood, and things aren't getting better. People are living in abject poverty. They're being left to wallow in their addictions, and they're suffering while the government just seems to be abandoning them to their fate. Now, when we get back after this break, we're going to talk about how your frontline experiences turned you into a staunch opponent of the radical harm reduction movement. We'll be back in a few minutes.